Part 75. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Enchenmi San. Chapter 774. Tisk, it seems that the hour I just saved on the flight will be wasted here, 33 said. If it helps our next actions, it can't be called a waste, Kaylan said. Valentina, don't join the war now. Find a place to hide the blasphemer Mecha. Valentina, understood. The blasphemer Mecha is too conspicuous, especially after the ARC's propaganda department released a recruitment short film edited with battle clips of mass-produced fallen angels. This model of Mecha has left a deep impression on the public's mind. Impression. If the blasphemer Mechas were directly allowed to participate in the battle, their identities would be easily guessed. You can't kill a chicken with a butcher's knife to deal with this ragtag group of people. 3 of the 5 people in this car can resolve the battle within a minute, and that's without using any hot weapons. Let's go and save people. Kaylan flicked the direction control lever, and the off-road vehicle drifted in place under the strong thrust, swinging the front of the vehicle in the direction of the gunfire, and flew away with smoke and dust. When Kaylan and the others entered the battlefield, the remnants of the heretical sect happened to be close enough to launch a charge. The remnant believers holding rocks and wooden sticks rushed out from behind the shield soldiers and gunners with strange screams. In just 2 breaths, they had already crossed the last 30 meters. Although 7 or 8 people were knocked down by stray bullets during the charge, when the distance between the 2 sides was erased, there was no advantage in defensive convenience. Although it is said that a gun is fast from 7 steps, and a gun is accurate and fast within 7 steps, this means that the gunman will have an absolute advantage when the difference in numbers between the 2 sides is not large, and when a gunman needs to deal with 3 when dealing with enemies in close proximity, the advantages brought by firearms are basically wiped out. A man holding a modified P90 had just shot down a remnant believer who jumped on the hood of a vehicle. He was hit hard on the back of the head by a flying stone. Even though he was protected by a tactical helmet, the blow was still intact. It is not fatal, but short-term dizziness is inevitable. At this moment, a remnant believer with a hunched body and a body as lean as a monkey seized this opportunity and jumped up. He slit the man's throat with the knife he held tightly in his hand. But before he could cheer for success, the barrel of the TAC-50 anti-materiel sniper rifle was pressed against his chest, followed by a thunderous gunshot. A 0.5-inch caliber anti-materiel sniper rifle can easily cut a person into pieces at a distance of 2,000 meters. As for zero-range shooting, the body of this remnant believer directly turned into a rain of blood that exploded in the sky. This shot seemed to be the only bullet left in the chamber of the TAC-50. After firing this shot, the female sniper threw away the heavy anti-materiel sniper rifle and pulled out a large one from her waist. With his Gurkha saber, he chopped down a remnant of the believers who rushed up in the rain of blood. But just when she stepped on the opponent's body and pulled out the saber stuck in the bones, she found that the battle had ended strangely. Including the shield soldiers and gunners, the corpses of the remnant believers who rushed over lay on the ground. Even the few black-robed men in the distance who were in charge of command and did not directly participate in the battle were now transformed into corpses. The body was lying on the ground. An armored off-road vehicle that was comparable in size to a tank was parked not far away. Several people wearing Field Force training uniforms without any logos or badges jumped off the armored off-road vehicle and walked towards it. The female sniper held down the pistol inserted in her waist with some vigilance, and asked Kaylan and others in a loud voice, "Who are you?" "We are not enemies." Kaylan raised his hands to indicate that he had no weapons in his hands. But what the female sniper didn't see was that at her feet, an inconspicuous black blade had quietly penetrated into the sand. As long as she made any attempt to draw a gun and shoot, this black blade would burst out of the ground in an instant and break her tendons. "These exiles, were you killed?" the female sniper asked again. In the brief hand-to-hand battle just now, in addition to the man whose throat was cut, another companion was seriously injured. One of the other two people was helping the injured person deal with his injuries, while the other was squatting on the ground holding a gun and looking nervously. By Kaylan and others. Otherwise, how could they have died on their own? Kaylan shrugged. There is one more thing I need to correct. This group of people is not actually exiles in the strict sense, but the remnants of a heretical section. You guys came down from the Ark. The female sniper's tone was slightly relaxed. In her opinion, people who can own such vehicles and equipment are not exiles wandering in the wilderness. Bye. Yes, Kaylan nodded and said shamelessly, we are an expedition team. We happened to hear the sound of a firefight when passing by. Driven by a sense of justice, we immediately decided to draw our swords to help when there was injustice on the road. Thank you. As if she didn't know how to express her gratitude, the female sniper nodded to Kaylan with a stiff expression. If you can, please leave your contact information. We will find a way after we return to the Ark. I'll repay you for saving my life. If you want to repay your life-saving grace, you don't have to wait until you return to the Ark. Kaylan looked at the four survivors and said silently in his heart. Were you an O.D.S.T before? Or were you in the 1st Regiment of the 1st Division? 33 glanced at the woman's left wrist. A female soldier who can be absorbed into the 1st Regiment is really awesome. It's so rare. Are you from the military? The female sniper was slightly startled and subconsciously covered her left wrist. But Kaylan had just seen a burning skull tattoo on the inside of her left wrist. O.D.S.T, the full name is Orbital Drop Shock Troopers, Orbital Airborne Assault Troops. Of course, among the people, they have a more famous name, called Hell Paratroopers. This force was formed before Ark landed on Alpha Planet. In order to clean up the indigenous biomes near the landing site, Ark's senior leaders specially formed a highly mobile force that could carry out individual airdrops from low Earth orbit and quickly enter the battlefield. The elite force, Hell Paratroopers, came into being. In order to withstand the high temperature during the airborne landing and the impact when landing, all members of this commando team were composed of modified people. This was a very bold decision in an era when human body modification surgery had not yet been publicly legalized. When the Ark successfully landed on Alpha Planet, the historical mission of the Hell Paratroopers was completed, but the designation of this legendary force was not revoked. Instead, it was retained as the code name of the most elite airborne force of the Field Corps. Came down and expanded to 4 divisions. However, in the eyes of many people, only the 1st Regiment of the 1st Division is the true inheritor of the Hell Paratroopers. Since this female sniper came from the 1st Regiment of the 1st Division of ODST, her strength can be explained. It was 33 replied, it's your turn to answer our question, who are you? Why are you besieged by this group of remnants of the heretical sect? We are, also explorers. Our convoy was suddenly attacked by these people when we passed through the Great Basin. They divided into several groups to chase and intercept us, and forced us to this place, the female sniper answered. Road. Explorer? Are you sure? Kaylan stared into the other person's eyes and said with a half smile. Okay, actually there is nothing to hide, we are a group of lumberjacks. The female sniper and Kaylan looked at each other for a few seconds, and then they were defeated and admitted, the Grey Mist Forest is located the edge of the Great Basin. You all know this, right? The specialty of the Grey Mist Forest, the mist perch, is an expensive and rare material in the upper class of Ark. The wood of the mist perch is as hard as metal and is invulnerable to water and fire. The furniture made from them is especially popular with wealthy people. Our job is to cut down the mist trees and process them into logs, and then transport them back to the Ark to sell them. It's that simple. If Mist Roost was so popular, the area around Grey Mist Forest would have been overcrowded a long time ago, Kaylan said. After all, people die for money and birds die for food, right? If there is such a way to make money, there must be many people want to get a piece of the pie, right? He walked slowly to the overturned off-road vehicle, squatted down, and carefully observed the logs tied to the roof rack. Mistwood is difficult to cut and process, and the transportation cost is very high, so the profit margin is not large, and it is not as profitable as you think, the female sniper explained. No, that's not right. Kaylan shook his head again. There are two types of fog perches. The fog perch that grows outside the red line area can only be considered average in wood. It is neither fireproof nor moth-proof. The market price will not be the same. Much higher than other solid wood materials. However, the fog perch that grows in the red line restricted area has solid wood with tight annual rings. Its hardness and toughness are comparable to alloys, and it can emit a special fragrance for a long time, and the parasitism of fog perch. Unlike the fog vine, this fragrance is not only non-toxic, but can also refresh the mind, just like the sandalwood on the earth in the old era. This kind of fog perch is the best quality that is truly sought after by the upper class. Kaylan stood up and continued, after crossing the red line, the deeper the mist perch, the better the quality, but the difficulty and danger of mining are also greater. Every 100 meters, the growth rings of the mist perch are the density can even be doubled, and I think the quality of these logs should be cut from a place about 200 meters away from the red line, right? You know, a lot about Wukamu, the female sniper muttered. This woman probably regards us as her companions, Kaylan thought to himself, since he has decided to come to the Grey Mist Forest to find out what's going on. He definitely doesn't have any information related to the Grey Mist Forest. I will let it go, and it naturally contains things related to Wu Chi Mu. But then again, these lumberjacks can go as deep as 200 meters behind the red line to harvest fog perches, and it seems that some of them also have two brushes. If everyone could go deep into this location to harvest fog perches like them, I'm afraid the outer areas of the Grey Mist Forest would have become as lively as the original Molten Mine area. It is indeed profitable to harvest high-quality mist trees, but not everyone can earn this money. I'm just more interested, Kaylan said casually. By the way, did you just say that you would repay our life-saving grace after returning to the Ark? I don't think you need to wait until you return. If you want to repay, you can do it now. You want these foggy trees. There was a hint of reluctance in the female sniper's words, but she did not refuse directly. If you want, I can take this batch of wood for you, but can you leave us one stick? No, half a stick will do. My companions suffered many casualties during this operation, and their families are still waiting for them to return on the Ark. If I just do this, if you come back empty-handed? The female sniper did not continue, but her meaning could not have been more obvious. She should be the leader of this group of lumberjacks. This is a good leader. At least he will not forget his dead companions. If the old dog is here, he probably can't help but feel sorry for the military's past. The pension system is smelling sweet. You misunderstood me. What I want is not these pieces of wood, but people. Kaylan pointed at the other party and said. Ah, the female sniper was stunned for a moment, and her eyes suddenly became a little weird, but when her eyes swept over Zeelugo, who was standing behind Kaylan, the panic and embarrassment in her eyes were so obvious it turned to shock for a moment, and then to confusion. Does this man want to use his body to repay the favor? No. No, the girl traveling with him is so beautiful, how could he be interested in her? This female sniper is not ugly, at least 6 minutes above the average level. This is without makeup. If she puts on light makeup, she can probably be close to the entertainment industry average level of 7 points. She also has a good figure, and carries a kind of heroic spirit that ordinary girls don't have in her movements. If she can get the dual blessing of makeup magic and PS armor, she can even reach the level of an 8-point goddess. However, compared with a monster with good looks like Zeelugo, even an 8-point goddess can still only be described by the word different from clouds and mud. We want to go deep into the Grey Mist Forest, and we need a guide who is familiar with the forest. Kaylan did not pay attention to the change in the other party's expression, and continued, I think there should be no one on the Ark who is more familiar with gray mist than you lumberjacks. Is it the foggy forest? Going deep into the gray mist forest? How deep do you plan to go? How many meters? The other party asked in astonishment. The depth she mentioned naturally refers to the depth beyond the red line. So far, excluding those who disappeared in the forest, the furthest human exploration record is 433 meters. We are going to the core area in the center of the gray mist forest, Kaylan said with a smile, right below the fog mountain. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Enchenmi San. Chapter 775. What did you say? The female sniper looked at Kaylan in disbelief. The core area of the forest. Are you kidding me? I'm not kidding. I'm very serious and sincere in asking you to be our guides and take us to the core area of the gray mist forest, Kaylan said seriously. Are you crazy? No one has ever been able to enter that place. The female sniper glared at Kaylan and took a few steps back. If you are here for the mist habitat, then I can not only give you this batch of wood, we can also take you to the area where we harvest wood, but if you want me to take you into the core area of the forest, I'm sorry, we can't do it. Not only can we not do it, I don't think there is anyone or any organization on the Ark that can reach that place. The female sniper's companion, another lumberjack, said, there used to be an elite armored field corps. The troops, more than 1,500 people, have not been able to come out after entering the gray mist forest. The terror of this forest is far beyond your imagination. Then the deepest place you have ever entered is a few hundred meters, Kaylan asked as he looked at the group of loggers. 200 meters, the man said guiltily. You are right, this batch of wood was harvested 200 meters away from the red line. Will you set the ultimate depth of your exploration as the operating area? Kaylan suddenly laughed. There are loopholes everywhere in this sentence, you might as well remain silent. The female sniper turned her head and glanced at her companion with some annoyance, and then said to Kaylan, okay, I admit, 200 meters is indeed just our daily logging depth. As for the maximum depth we actually explored, depth. She paused and lowered her voice slightly, almost, it's 500 meters. Kaylan raised his eyebrows. So, your exploration record and the expedition team that broke the record in history. It seems that you are all a group of real people, and you prefer practicality to illusory fame. Benefits. The female sniper did not answer, which was equivalent to acquiescing to Ian's statement. Making a fortune in silence is what smart people do. Tell me specifically about that experience of exploring a depth of 500 meters. Kaylan stepped forward and put his arm around the other person's shoulders in a familiar manner. During the exploration process, we encountered those dangers and emergencies. How did you deal with these things? How many casualties did you pay? I am very interested in these things. The female sniper tried to struggle, but found that her own strength could not shake Kaylan at all. Then she asked a little discouraged, what you want to know is actually how to walk through the gray fog forest, right? Chatting with smart people saves effort. Kaylan grinned. Before that, let's introduce each other, the female sniper said. My name is Moju. He guessed it right. I retired from the 1st Regiment of the 1st Division of ODST. The injured one's name is Moxin. My younger brother, the other two are named Danning, who used to serve in the Field Corps and is an old man in our lumberjack team, and the other is nicknamed Lone Wolf, who just joined us not long ago, and this is his first time. Second participation in logging operations. Kaylan noticed that many parts on Moju's body were replaced with cybernetic bodies. In Ark's military system, the main reason for soldiers who can retire before the age of 30 is disability. I used to be a lone ruin hunter, but I was unlucky and lost 2 legs in the ruins. I spent nearly 10 years recuperating from my injuries. I almost spent all the savings I saved in my early years, so I could only find a way to hang out. Food. A former friend of mine pulled me into this team, but it's a pity. The lone wolf, whose legs were mechanically prosthetic below the knees, looked at a corpse next to the overturned off-road vehicle, and there was a hint of emotion in his eyes. A hint of sadness. "We have told you our names, you should also be honest with us, right?" Emoju glanced sideways at Kaylan. "Also, can you let me go? I'm not used to this. Being hugged by a man." Of course Kaylan immediately let go of Emoju, who immediately opened a few meters away from him. "It's just that what I said can mean letting you go. As for being honest, I would like to remind you that if you know our true identity, I'm afraid it will cause a lot of trouble for you." "Trouble? Especially after returning to the Ark, you'd better pretend you've never seen us." "Who are you?" Emoju's heart was raised after she had just put it down. She put one hand behind her back and gestured calmly to the others, her eyes warily looking back and forth at Kaylan and the others. Kaylan did not answer her question directly, but snapped his fingers. Accompanied by a harsh sound of gas rubbing against the ground, Valentina appeared behind Kaylan in a blasphemer mecha, carrying sand and dust several meters high. Ahem. The gray-headed Kaylan wiped a handful of dust on his face. "Although this way of showing off is cool, I will definitely not adopt this plan next time. Or, Ziluo should be asked to help block the dust in advance." However, at this time, few members of the lumberjack team had no time to pay attention to K-Ian's embarrassment. Their attention was completely attracted by the 10-meter-tall blasphemer mecha, and their mouths were opened wide enough to hold a mouthful. Whole eggs. Especially the guy named Danning. After seeing this mobile phone, the gun in his hand fell directly to the ground. With a look of shock on his face, he walked out from behind the temporary fortification built by the 3 off-road vehicles, a little staggering. He walked as far as the blasphemer mecha and swallowed hard. Danning glanced at Kaylan and asked, "Is this the mass-produced model of fallen angel? I have been paying attention to the battle at the ruins of the Bronze City. I have seen it in the official video clip. The mass-produced version of the fallen angel, which Ark copied based on the blasphemer mecha, does not look much different in appearance, and no one knows about the living CPU except for high-level military officials and people from the Undead Crew Association." Kaylan he simply ignored the mistake and nodded, "Yes, that's right." "Are you from the Ark official?" Emoju reacted immediately. "That's correct no matter how you think about it," Kaylan replied. "We are carrying out a secret mission. In fact, according to the mission requirements, we should have wiped out you and the remnants of these heretical sects together. But we have no idea what your mission is." Emoju took another step back. "You can't. There cannot be any witnesses to this mission, especially since you now know that our destination is the core of the Grey Mist Forest. You told me this yourself. But you already know that, don't you?" Kaylan clapped his hands, and 33 immediately controlled the black flying blades that had been buried in the sand to fly up, stopping at a few lumberjacks' throat position. "Are you planning to silence me?" Emoju was forced to raise her head. Although she didn't understand why the black blade parked on her throat was levitating, she knew very well that she knew the other party. "If you are willing, the lives of these people will be ended in an instant. I said that if I planned to silence him, I would launch an indiscriminate attack from the beginning." Kaylan shrugged, reaching out and pinching the blade at Emoju's throat, "but I didn't do that. It's because we are still valuable to you." Emoju's expression was a little complicated. "You want us to take you into the Grey Mist Forest, and after we are drained of useful information, you will still kill us to silence us. Although I really want to say don't think of me so meanly, it doesn't seem to be convincing just by talking about it." Kaylan picked off the black blade, and when he released his finger, the blade flew back automatically. 33 there. Well, the big brother 33 cooperates well and knows how to act. Let's add a big chicken drumstick to him later. Well, in order to show my sincerity, I can let half of you stay outside the forest and half of you follow us into the forest. In this way, even if I really want to silence you, at least half of you can survive, right?" Kaylan, he suggested, you'd better not bargain. You know, if we hadn't intervened just now, you would all be corpses now. Okay, Emoju nodded decisively, my brother is seriously injured. Let him stay outside and I will go in with you. There is still one person left. Kaylan raised a finger, you can discuss who will stay to take care of the injured and who will go with us with your boss. I'll go with you. Danning looked at the lone wolf and said, Old wolf, although you are older than me, you have just joined our team. You also know that our rule is that the veteran is responsible for breaking up the family. You stay and take care of Xioxin, the boss, and I will go with them. Remember to collect other people's corpses, Emoju also said to the lone wolf. Lone wolf hesitated for a moment, but did not refuse. He nodded vigorously, I will take Moxin and everyone else back. But at this moment, Kaylan suddenly pulled out his pistol and fired a few bang-bang shots, blowing out all the tires of several off-road vehicles and the spare tires hanging on the rear of the vehicles. Valentina walked up to the trucks belonging to the remnants of the heretic sect and waved her armor-piercing sword a few times, breaking the trucks into several pieces. What are you doing? Emoju asked in shock and anger. Without the car, it is impossible for them to return to the Ark alive. I didn't say not to let them go back, but I can't let them go back right now, Kaylan said. The four of you, take our car and go to the Grey Mist Forest together. When we reach the edge of the forest, I will take this car. Leave the car to your brother and Lone Wolf, but by then, I will set a time lock on the car for a few hours. When we go deep into the Grey Fog Forest, the time lock will be unlocked and they can drive the car back. Ark. This car is much safer than your vehicles. Even if you encounter indigenous creatures on the road, you will not be afraid at all. Of course, the most important thing is for the stealth of the action. What about you? Without a vehicle, do you plan to walk back to the Ark on your feet? Emoju was stunned for a moment and asked. Let's wait until we can come out of the Grey Mist Forest alive to discuss this issue. Kaylan waved to several members of the lumberjack team, get in the car. After 2.5 hours of journey, Kaylan and Emoju finally arrived at the edge of the Grey Mist Forest. After handing over the locked armored off-road vehicle to Moxin and Lone Wolf as promised, Kaylan and the six of them together with Emoju and Danning, they walked into the dense forest shrouded in thick fog. Mist perches all grow very tall. Even in the outskirts of the forest, the shortest adult fog perch is more than 20 meters tall. The dense canopy and the thick mist released by the fog vines make the light in the forest as dim as like a cave. Emoju and Danning skillfully took out gas masks from their backpacks and fastened them on their faces, and then connected the oxygen generator tank to the breathing tube. After doing all this, Emoju turned around and took a look. Kaylan and the others, who did not do anything at all, asked strangely, didn't you prepare gas masks? You know Wuchimu so well, you should also know that these fogs are poisonous, right? It's not needed yet, Kaylan said. Even if all of you are high-level modified people with high toxin resistance, you must wear gas masks, Emoju said seriously. Even if the toxins in the mist are not fatal to you, they will still affect the body's reaction ability, and making people hallucinate. This is the most dangerous thing. Emoju got stuck in the middle of her words because she was surprised to find that when Kaylan walked into the fog, the thick gray fog actually took the initiative to avoid it, and a radius of about 100 meters appeared around Kaylan. 2 meters of clear area. Not only him, but also several other people were exactly the same. The mist seemed to be blocked by an invisible barrier. No matter how it rolled, it could not invade the 2 meters around these people. What kind of equipment is this? Emoju couldn't help but ask. Don't look at what you shouldn't look at, and don't ask about what you shouldn't ask. Kaylan smiled and touched his lips with his index finger. He finally knew why the people in the Undead Crew Club always liked to say this to him before. Although the pleasure brought by pretending to be cool is very low-level and vulgar, it is really good if you can't stand it. Although he was extremely curious in his heart, Moju still suppressed this curiosity and said to Kaylan, I know you are very powerful, but if you take the grey mist forest lightly because of this, you will never be able to get out of it. She turned to look at Kaylan and continued, this forest is cannibalistic, in the true sense of the word, cannibalistic. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Chen-Mi-san. Chapter 776. Moju walked to a foggy tree as thick as the mouth of a sea bowl and said to Kaylan and others, the area outside the red line is relatively safe, but conventional positioning equipment often fails when you lose your direction. We usually choose to use the tree ring method to determine north and south. The tree ring method is a very ancient method of identifying directions. On the Earth in the old era, people often used this method when they lost their way in the forest. The principle is also very simple. Most plants are phototropic and will tend to the direction of the light source during their growth. Whether on Earth or on Alpha Star, the side close to the equator always has more sunlight. From this, it can be determined that the side with sparser growth rings is in the direction of the equator, and the side with denser growth rings is in the direction of the equator, near the pole of its hemisphere. At this point, the mist trees are the same as the trees on the Earth. Moju opened his backpack and found a small circular saw driven by energy crystals. Judging from the texture of the saw blade, it should be mixed with a high proportion of nino alloy. The grey mist forest is located in the northern hemisphere of Alpha Star, so the side with dense annual rings is north, and the side with sparse annual rings is south. She turned the searchlight on her helmet at an angle, facing the tree in front of her. Wukyu then started the circular saw. You don't need to cut down the entire tree, you only need to cut off a wedge to determine the direction. But just when Moju was about to start sawing, a badly worn scabbard suddenly lay in front of her. What's wrong? Moju turned her head. The only one in the group who stopped her was a young man wearing sunglasses. From the moment they met until now, this guy who had been holding a long knife and closing his eyes had not said a word. It seems that even the eyes have not been opened. As a Hell paratrooper, Moju is naturally a modified person. Her right eye looks like a normal human eyeball, but it is actually a cyborg prosthetic eye. The sunglasses worn by Akira Asano are harmful to her. There is no blocking effect at all. This guy, why is he still closing his eyes now? Moju muttered in his heart and took a step away. Is something wrong? Using a saw is too slow. Our time is precious, Kaylan replied for Asano. Akira, let him do it. It will be faster. Kaylan said this, but he was complaining in his heart. Akira Asano, a boy with thick eyebrows and big eyes, suddenly learned to show off. No, this guy, ever since I met him, seems to be showing off all the time, but the people around him don't feel weird about his pretending to be cool at all. This is probably the highest level of pretentiousness in the legend. Invisible pretense is the most deadly. It's faster to let him come. What do you mean? Moju was stunned for a moment, but still handed over the circular saw in his hand. But Akira Asano just shook his head and didn't answer. Back up a little, be careful not to get hit, Kaylan reminded kindly, grabbed Moju's arm and pulled her back a dozen steps. Asano Akira held the scabbard with one hand and the handle with the other. He only heard a clanging sound of gold and iron coming from the tandem and the sheath. No one except Kaylan and Zelugo even saw it. In the scene where the long sword is unsheathed, a grey sword light has been embedded in the tree trunk. Moju. The next second, with this disappearing grey sword light as the dividing line, the upper half of the tree trunk collapsed. Did he cut this tree with a knife? And he only cut it once. Moju couldn't believe his eyes. Wait a minute, really did you draw your sword? Danning subconsciously focused his attention on the blasphemer mecha standing at the very back, and murmured, it couldn't have been, the fallen angel mecha, right? It's just a foggy tree with a diameter of 20 centimeters. Is there such a fuss? Kaylan waved his hand, walked forward, and carefully observed the annual rings on the cut surface of the tree trunk. They entered the gray mist forest from the southwest and headed north toward the red line. Judging from the tree's annual rings, there was no deviation in the direction. Of course, this is just because they are still in the outer zone of the gray mist forest. The fog here is not too thick, and the visibility is about 10 meters. Using nearby trees and terrain features as markers, plus 2 experienced guides, Moju and Danning, you would be lost here. Then they might as well turn around and return to the Ark now. After continuing to walk north for almost 5 minutes, Moju had fully digested the shock, but she would still raise her eyes from time to time to glance at Asano Akira. If she guessed correctly, this person who had always hugged him, the young man who wields a long sword and almost never opens his eyes, is probably the most powerful in the group. Without counting the fallen angel Mecha as a person. Although the annual ring method is easy to use, it is only limited to the area outside the red line, Moju said to Kaylan. After crossing the red line, the annual rings of the mist perch will grow closer and closer. It is also clear that the annual rings of the foggy trees 100 meters behind the red line are almost all crowded together, and it is impossible to tell where they are dense and where they are sparse. Well, if the tree ring method can still be used after crossing the red line, this forest will not be so scary as people describe it, Kaylan said in a relaxed tone. You loggers will also benefit a lot. It's gone down. After all, things are more valuable when they are scarce. Since you guys can break that expedition's record, you must have some unique tricks. 33 continued. Lumberjacks, since the end of the old era, this profession has almost disappeared. 1,000 years. In the area behind the red line, the visibility will drop rapidly. If you walk about 100 meters away, the visibility will be reduced to less than half a meter. You can't even see your companions standing next to you. Moju said with some envy. He glanced at the fog around him and said, but if your fog dispelling equipment can always be effective even after the red line, the fog won't be a big hindrance to you. Besides the fog itself, is there anything else we need to pay attention to? Kaylan asked. If the fog can be blocked more than 10 meters away and you can travel unimpeded, the gray fog forest will not become a restricted area, right? The fog is just one of the problems that can be best solved, but the real trouble is hidden in the fog. As for things to pay attention to, they are all in the entire forest, Moju said. Kaylan, you might as well speak more clearly. It's difficult for me to describe those things clearly to you in words. You will understand them when you actually encounter them. Moju frowned and said. You didn't tell us everything you knew and then we silenced you, did you? 33 joked casually. Kill me, a bitter smile appeared on Moju's face. I'm afraid, before you can silence me, we will all die in this forest. When you decided to come with us, were you already prepared to die? Yvonne couldn't help but ask. Anyway, you saved my life. If you want to take it, just treat it as repaid. As long as my brother can still live, it will be fine, Moju said with an indifferent expression. You're not so pessimistic, are you? Kaylan touched his nose. The last time you explored to a depth of 500 meters, how many people were lost? 2 people, Moju replied. How many of you were there in total during that exploration operation? 11. Only 2 of the 11 people were lost. You are much stronger than the expedition team in the records, Kaylan praised. Nearly 50 people crossed the red line, but in the end only less than 20 came back. Moreover, their team members' strength, equipment, and logistics level are better than yours, but their exploration distance is not as far as yours. But I know that if we go deeper than at least 10 meters that time, the end result waiting for us will be annihilation, Moju said. Actually, when we broke the record of that expedition, we were still full. These 2, the individual, disappeared before turning back in the end. How did you disappear? Can you tell me the process in detail? Kaylan asked curiously. Also, What did you encounter 500 meters away? Why did you say that if you go more than 10 meters further, the entire army will be wiped out? I don't know. Moju shook his head. I was not the leader of the lumberjacks at that time, the leader was my father, and his knowledge of the grey mist forest is far better than mine. What about your father? Kaylan regretted the question as soon as he asked it. Now that Moju has become the leader of this team, there is a high probability that his father has passed away, judging from Moju's age. His father should not be old enough to have to retire. He was one of the 2 people we lost during that exploration operation. Moju's answer was just as Kaylan vaguely guessed. After that, I became the new team leader, and I no longer allow if anyone in the team goes deeper into the grey mist forest. The wood at 200 meters is enough for us to live a comfortable life. It seems that your father is the kind of person with a pioneering and enterprising spirit. It's a pity that his daughter is more timid. 33 commented. This is not cowardice, I am thinking about everyone, we just want to protect our own lives. We are loggers, not explorers. If we want to pursue excitement, why don't we become relic hunters? Why do I feel like I've been dis? Kaylan touched the tip of his nose again with some guilt and said to himself. Moju wanted to say something else, but Dan Ning, who was walking at the front, suddenly stopped and said in a deep voice, "We're here." What he was referring to was naturally the junction between the restricted area and the outer zone of the grey mist forest, the red line. Directly in front of everyone, a thick and solid wall of fog spread, almost like a substance. Compared with this wall of fog, the fog beyond the red line was simply too thin. The most surprising thing is that although the fog in the 2 areas is connected to each other and there are signs of flowing between each other, the concentration between them does not interfere with each other. Kaylan can't help but think of an idiom. The difference between the 2 areas is clear. The illusion of this idiom comes from the 2 major tributaries of the Yellow River in China, the Weihe River and the Jinghe River. When these 2 rivers come together, a strange landscape with clear and turbidity will appear. One side of the river is as clear and green as emerald, and the other side it is an earthy yellow turbid current carrying a large amount of sediment. The dividing line between the 2 bodies of water is as clear as if it were drawn with a pen. The scene before Ian's eyes now was almost the same as this distinct spectacle. Even if you can dispel the fog, I still recommend fastening the safety rope, Moju said. The safety rope she was referring to was a steel core cable more than 50 meters long. Both ends of the cable were fixed to Denning at the front of the team and the broken blasphemer Mecha at the back. The others used belts. Connect yourself to the main rope with the buckled auxiliary rope. In this way, you can avoid falling behind and missing to a certain extent. Logically speaking, if everyone is strung together like grasshoppers on a rope, no one will get lost with the large army, but according to the records, all expedition teams trying to enter the grey mist forest carried this kind of equipment, but even if they tied themselves to the safety rope, the people who should be missing were still missing. Some people even walked out of the forest without realizing it, only to find the safety rope and the lock on the safety rope. All the other companions were missing. Put on the gas masks too. Kaylan looked at the others and took the lead in putting on the mask. Blocking the fog relies on Ze Lugo's spatial ability, but if a battle breaks out, Ze Lugo may not be able to take care of everyone. After doing all this, Kaylan took a deep breath of the air in the mask that had the unique sour smell when the oxygen generator reacted. He grabbed the auxiliary rope around his waist with one hand and put the other hand on the heavy main rope. He stepped across the red line, walked into the wall of fog. Ze Lugo, remove the barrier first and try to see how powerful the fog is. Visibility, about 2 to 3 meters. 33's voice came from Ian's right side. He was no more than 5 steps away from Kaylan, but his voice seemed to come from 50 meters away. These fogs can not only block the field of vision, but also affect the transmission of sound. Kaylan took 2 more steps forward, looked up, and saw a black skeleton looking at him. Open the barrier. As soon as he finished speaking, the surrounding fog was pushed away by a big invisible hand. Only then did Kaylan see clearly that in front of him was a foggy perch with two people hugging each other, and the skeleton just now was a human skeleton that was almost integrated into the tree trunk. Most of this skeleton has been embedded in the tree, and the gaps between the bones are almost completely filled with wood fibers. It looks a bit like the fossils of ancient creatures, except that the stones have been replaced by wood. From the helmet fastened on the skull, it can be determined that the deceased was a soldier of the 9th Independent Armored Corps of the Field Corps, that is, one of the 1,500 armored troops. Hey, this corpse. 33 also noticed the situation here. Why is it embedded in the trunk of the tree? Could it be that this guy was leaning on this tree when he died, and then the tree grew and wrapped the skeleton inside? It would take at least 300 years for this mist perch to grow to this extent. When this person died, the tree was already this thick. He was swallowed by this tree. Moju's face turned a little pale. I told you a long time ago that this forest can eat people. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Chen San. Chapter 777. Really? 33 narrowed his eyes and kicked the foggy tree with the skeleton embedded in it hard. However, the tree trunk only trembled slightly due to the impact and did not react in any way. Can this thing really eat people? Ivan stepped forward with interest and took out a knife from the tool bag on his waist. Can I peel off some samples and take them back for study? Only when you are alone and shrouded in heavy fog, the horror of this forest will gradually become apparent, Moju said with lingering fear, as if some terrible memories were evoked. Then it seems we are quite safe. 33 patted the strong tree trunk and picked up the safety rope around his waist, because we will neither be shrouded in fog nor alone. Forget it if you don't believe it. Moju frowned and sighed. The well-known expedition team also brought mist-dispersing equipment with them when they entered the depths of the grey fog forest. The team members also had such safety ropes fixed around their waists, but they still lost 2/3 of their men before escaping from the forest. You know, they only crossed the red line 400 meters. As for you, if you care about your life, I really suggest that you turn around and return immediately. Unless Ark sends a fleet to uproot this forest, no one will be able to reach the bottom of that foggy mountain. Well, you have a point. Kaylan nodded to Moju and turned to look at 33. I know you are not afraid of death, but don't set the flag in a hurry. According to that expedition team, according to the oral records of the survivors, they did not encounter any battles in the grey fog forest, and all the injured team members disappeared inexplicably. This forest is indeed very weird. Well, I have read all of the 165 pages of detailed records, Ivan agreed. Many times, when I turn around, I find that the companion behind me has disappeared. When I asked other people, they didn't notice when and how the person disappeared. It was like walking and the person suddenly evaporated on the spot, and it disappeared silently and without causing any disturbance. Any kind of attention. Could it have been teleported away? 33 put forward a hypothesis. Just like the space stack on Agunakotaur, this forest looks like a maze, but in fact it is in the physical maze. There is also a layer of space maze composed of chaotic spaces nested on the basis of it. Are the people who disappeared actually the folded space that they passed through and were transported to other places? Zeelogo, Kaylan looked at the girl following him with a questioning look. Zeelogo shook his head slightly. Through this journey, at least so far, I have not found any abnormal signs in the space in the forest. Then it seems that 33's guess doesn't make sense. Kaylan turned his head, only to find Moju staring at him. What's wrong? Is there something on my face? Kaylan stretched out his hand and rubbed his cheek hard. I have always thought that I have seen your face somewhere before, but I just can't remember it. It wasn't until your companion mentioned Agunakotaur that I remembered. You are the one Kaylan, right? That Kaylan who found the ancient battleship Yagunactor in the molten mine area and was appointed as the captain of this battleship by the Ark's senior management. You are not official. You are a group of relics hunter, Moju said with some excitement. Kaylan was stunned for a moment. He didn't disguise himself, which meant that he had no intention of hiding his identity. Even the gas mask he wore on his face was completely transparent and could cover his entire face. See clearly. He is not the kind of person who is shockingly handsome or unforgettably ugly, so it is normal for the other party not to recognize him at first sight. I'm Kaylan, he nodded, but why do you look a little excited? What, are you my little crush? No, it's not because of this. Moju shook her head vigorously. She didn't even care about the ridicule in Ian's words, and said incoherently, you are ruin hunters. The reason why you entered the Grey Mist Forest is because of the core. There is a ruins of Alpha civilization in the area, right? Your goal is that ruins, you are looking for that ruins, right? The ruins in the core of the forest, do you know the existence of that ruin? Ian's heart moved and he immediately asked, what do you know about that ruin? I don't know. However, Moju shook his head with some disappointment. I only heard my father say that there is a huge secret buried in the center of the Grey Mist Forest. The reason why he organized a team, we launched explorations deeper into the forest again and again just to explore that secret. At that time, Lumberjack was just our side job, and it was also a face identity used to conceal the true purpose of our team. However, after my father disappeared, it all ended. Moju lowered his head and squatted down, seeming to complain, and said, speaking of which, my father is really ridiculous. It is already so difficult to penetrate a distance of 500 meters, but he still wants to cross a 50-kilometer restricted area. Go to some core area to explore the secret. That is true or false? Miss Moju, what do you know about your father? Kaylan suppressed his inner restlessness, squatted in front of Moju, and asked patiently, for example, what did he do before? He was how to become a lumberjack and how to learn that there is a secret in the center of the Grey Mist Forest. I hope you can tell me all this information, this is very important to me. I don't know much about my father. Moju shook his head. When I was young, I rarely had the opportunity to see him because he was a soldier and served on a certain battleship in the Air Force fleet. When he retired, I just came of age. Later, he relied on his connections in the Army to send me to the Air Force Military Academy. At first, he wanted my younger brother to join the Army, but my younger brother wanted to be a soldier at that time. A black marketeer, he ran away from home after a big fight with his father. Go on, Kaylan said gently. Although these things may sound completely irrelevant to the point, in many cases, crucial clues are often hidden in such seemingly insignificant places. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Chen-Mi-san. Chapter 778. My written test scores at the Air Force Academy were not very good. I was not selected into the fleet's crew class and was assigned to the Marine Corps on a fast assault ship. Moju continued. Fourth-class soldiers, Marun, get the worst equipment and do the hardest and most tiring work. They have the highest mortality rate in the entire Air Force fleet. 33 shrugged. Obviously they are a unit affiliated with the Air Force system. As a result, the monthly military pay, food, and clothing allotment are not even as good as those of the garrison. Do you know what other troops call Marine? Humanoid self-propelled bipedal multi-purpose animal. Yes, the Marine Corps' treatment is very poor, and the combat tasks assigned are also very heavy. Moju nodded, but thanks to this, I have accumulated a lot of military exploits and experience. Compared with those who for the job of operating a battleship, it seems that I am more suitable to be a soldier who charges into battle. In my third year of joining the Army, I was selected by O.D.S.T. and became a Hell paratrooper. Being selected by ODST shows that you are very talented in this area. It would be a real waste if you were sent to drive a battleship. 33 nodded. But I only stayed in ODST for less than a year. I was seriously injured during a combat mission and had to choose to retire. Moju pointed to the man-made parts on his body and said, I have taken good care of myself. After being injured and returning home, I found out that my mother had died of illness a month ago, and my father had gathered a group of people and formed a little-known team of lumberjacks. Moju sighed and continued, actually, he had already started exploring the Grey Mist Forest before I graduated from the Air Force Military Academy. The identity of lumberjack was just a cover, but it was not a completely false identity. Their team's various activity funds, equipment purchase expenses, and living expenses of all family members all need to be obtained by selling fog perch trees. In this way, they explore the Grey Fog Forest while harvesting fog perch trees. My father originally didn't want me to join this team, but at that time I was discharged from the army due to injury and the double blow of my mother's death. I was very depressed and even tried to commit suicide. He had no choice but to take me with him. As time went by, I became integrated into this team. At the beginning, I didn't know their true purpose of forming this team. I naively thought that they were exploring deeper into the forest to harvest better quality mist trees and make more money, until one day, outside his father's tent, he overheard a conversation between him and several of the first members who formed the team with him. The content of the conversation was very vague, and I couldn't hear it very clearly, but they mentioned the central area of the forest many times, and what other wrecks, ruins and the like. Wreckage. Ruins. Does this refer to the engine wreckage site located in the middle of the Grey Fog Forest? Kaylan couldn't help but take a deep breath. Isn't this a secret that only the Undead Crew Guild is qualified to know? Why would Moju's father know? My father and those people were very alert. I only eavesdropped for a few minutes before I was discovered. I still remember that the other people had strange expressions at that time, but they left quickly without saying anything. After that, my father took me pulled into the tent. Moju recalled. He asked me what I heard, and my answer was the same as what I just said. He sighed, patted me on the shoulder, and said, how about I quit this team and find another job? I didn't understand very much. I asked him what he meant. He hesitated for a long time before telling me that they were pursuing a secret buried in the core of the Grey Mist Forest. This secret even involved the disappearance of the Alpha civilization. Reason. Why did Alpha civilization disappear? Kaylan and everyone else present couldn't help but hold their breath and stared at Moju intently, waiting for her to continue. But I asked him what the secret was, and he refused to tell me. He only asked me to quit the lumberjack team. Of course I refused to agree, and the matter was delayed for several months, until they decided to launch an attack to a depth of 500 meters. Then your father disappeared. Kaylan suddenly understood the mentality of those readers who saw that the novel he was following suddenly eunuched and wanted to hack the author to death. Well, my father has a notebook that he carries with him. He writes down the records of each action, the discoveries made during the exploration, and what they often discussed in meetings, but he never allowed me to touch that notebook. So for my father, I may not know as much as you about the secret I'm talking about. As for my brother, he only joined us after his father disappeared. He was deceived in his business and owed a lot of debt. There is really nothing he can do about it. Just found me. What about that notebook? 33 asked subconsciously. She already said that her father carried it with her. Without even thinking about it, she must have disappeared with her father. Kaylan said, it's a pity. If this thing can be left behind. Moju nodded and agreed with Ian's statement. By the way, what about the others, those who discussed the secret with your father? Where are they now? Kaylan asked again. Not everyone in the team knows the secret. Only the few people who originally formed this team know, but they either disappeared like their father, or died in the battle just now. The only two remaining personally, you showed up about 10 minutes after they died, Moju replied. Kaylan punched the ground angrily. If only we could have rushed there earlier. God knows we missed such an important clue in just 10 minutes. Don't you even know what's in the Grey Mist Forest? Moju asked curiously. Aren't you ruin hunters? Didn't you come here because there is a ruin in the Grey Mist Forest? This matter, how should I put it? Kaylan smacked his lips. Actually, the purpose of our trip has nothing to do with our identity as ruin hunters. We are also pursuing a secret, and it is very possible that the secret we are pursuing and the secret your father is pursuing are the same thing. Kaylan stretched out his fingers and pressed the temples on both sides of his head, reviewing the words Emoju just said one by one. In a daze, he seemed to see a few words light up in his mind. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Chenmi-san. Chapter 779. Wait a minute, Miss Emoju, did you say that your father served in the ARC's Air Force fleet? Was it because of his relationship that you were able to enter the Air Force Military Academy? Emoju nodded. Do you know the number of the fleet your father served in and the hull number of the battleship? I was still very young at that time, and my father only came home a few times a year, and he never told me about things in the army. Emoju shook his head and said. By the way, what's your father's name? Emozworyui. Kaylan immediately entered the name into the data terminal he carried with him. Soon, a service file appeared on the screen. Emozworyui, male, was born in 898 of the New Era. He joined the ARC Field Corps in 915 of the New Era. In 919 of the New Era, he was transferred to the newly built ARC Air Force 2nd Cruise Fleet Officer Reserve to receive systematic training. The following year, he was transferred arrival at the Shanyan-class high-mobility support ship Favale with hull number B92013, and serve as C.I.C Information Control Officer with the rank of Captain. Note, C.I.C is the abbreviation of Combat Information Center, which means Combat Intelligence Center. It is one of the most important places on the battleship. If the bridge where the commander is located is the brain of the entire battleship, then C.I.C is the brain of the battleship nerve center. The main tasks of the C.I.C include but are not limited to, controlling internal and external communications of the entire ship, assisting the commander in specifying operational plans, collecting, integrating and analyzing various combat intelligence and information, and acting as a communication link between the commander and the officers and soldiers of the entire ship. Information communication bridge, coordinating the work and combat positions of all ship personnel, etc. Shinyan-class high-mobility support ship Favale. The name Kaylan is not unfamiliar. This was one of the 3 high-mobility support ships that formed the Special Operations Fleet when the destruction of the number 63 engine wreck site was carried out. If Kaylan remembered correctly, the Favale was not sunk, but followed the heavy cruiser and another high-mobility support ship out of the airspace of the Grey Fog Forest. Kaylan continued reading the archives. Sure enough, the next line in this file was the record of Captain Emozworyui Kia. The cause of death was the explosion of the ammunition depot of the anti-aircraft artillery on the battleship's flank. However, 2 years later, this record was revised to mistake, and was blown up into another missing C.I.C officer in coke. As for Emozworyui, he was trapped in the collapsed cabin and was not rescued until the battleship returned to port for repairs. He was directly sent to the nearest hospital for rescue. Although the Favale was not sunk, there were a large number of crew casualties on the ship. The wounded, dead and missing added up to 100 people. Even the hospital could not figure out what the names of the wounded it treated were during the rescue operation. The names were simply numbered in the order in which the injured were brought in. The file management at that time was very chaotic, and Emozworyui's death record was not revised until 2 years later. But perhaps it was precisely because of the error in this file that the undead crew missed a character like Emozworyui when they were planning to exterminate them afterwards, allowing him to barely escape. 2 years later, Emozworyui resurrected from the dead, but by that time he had faded out of the sight of the Immortal Crew Association. As for the military, although they knew that he was not dead, Those generals did not know that the Immortal Crew Association, those who have a silence plan, will not report the matter of a little captain to the Undead Crew Association. What did Mos Woyui discover during that mission that made him take such a big risk and return to the Grey Mist Forest? Kaylan was thinking about it, but couldn't find one reasonable explanation. According to the description in the mission report, the Special Operations Fleet was forced to abandon the mission before reaching the mission area. In other words, they did not even see the shadow of the engine wreckage. There are also those who formed this lumberjack team with Mos Woyui. Logically speaking, it is already a very small probability that the undead crew will miss one Mos Woyui. There cannot be so many leaks of fish. What purpose did those people have in joining this team? Miss Emoju, can you describe, besides your father, the other people who know the secret? Kaylan asked. Kaylan felt that since Mos Woyui couldn't find any more clues, he might be able to get some clues from the origins of several other people. In addition to my father, there were 4 other people, Emoju recalled. I don't know what they did before. Neither my father nor themselves have ever mentioned it, but from some details, I can confirm that they all have served in the military. Can you tell me more specifically? Kaylan continued to ask. Anyway, now that they have entered the area behind the red line, even if the undead crew is aware of Ian's plan, it is too late to stop it. They have plenty of time, and the supplies carried by the team are enough to support everyone. Survive in the forest for more than 3 months. The first one is Uncle Hong. I don't know his specific name. He is a very strong man, probably in his 50s or 60s. He has a buzz cut all year round. According to family members, it seems that he has a biological daughter and an adopted son. He was another person who disappeared with my father during that expedition. The second person, I call him Uncle Jinmao, but my father and Uncle Hong call him Jinmao directly. He is about 40 years old, a Caucasian with blonde hair, but his blonde hair is dyed. His original hair color was brown. He doesn't seem to have a family. Emoju paused here, and then hesitated awkwardly. When he was resting on the ark, he always liked to soak in that kind of place. What kind of place to soak in? It's just a place like Kabukiko Ichiban Street. Emoju said, I don't have a deep impression of him. I just remember that every time he appeared, he would exude a strong scent of perfume, sometimes on his neck and shoulders. There will still be lip marks that have not been wiped clean, but not long after I joined the lumberjack team, he disappeared during an operation. I only remember that the depth of the exploration was about 350 meters. There are 2 people left, one named John and the other named Anthony. Both of them are about the same age as Golden Retriever. Just during the chase with the group of heretical sect believers, the off-road vehicle they were driving was overturned by a rocket. As soon as they climbed out of the carriage, they were beaten to death by those who rushed up. They actually take good care of me on weekdays, especially after my father disappeared. If it weren't for them, I wouldn't be able to manage it at all. Good team, no matter what, I still have to thank you for avenging them. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Enchenmi-san. Chapter 780. John, Anthony, are very common names. Don't you have a surname? Kaylan scratched his head. If the names John and Anthony were directly entered into the archives, there would probably be people with the same name. There are tens of thousands of people. Even if we only look for those who have served in the military and are of the right age, I am afraid we would have to have tens of thousands of people. What's more, these people may also be using pseudonyms. There is no last name, they have always kept their affairs secret. I know the names, experiences, and family situations of everyone in the lumberjack team. There are only 4 of them seniors, and their identities are not made public. If their identities are not disclosed, how can their families get pensions if they die? Yvonne asked. Each of them has an unnamed savings account. If something happens to one of them, the remaining people will have to pay a sum of money into this account regularly every month, When my father disappeared, I was elected as the team member. After the new leader, Uncle John and Uncle Anthony told me about it. Huh, if it's so mysterious, aren't they afraid of being mistaken by the Security Bureau as a secret agent planted by a heretical sect on the Ark? 33 said. The secrets involved in this matter are far more serious than having a connection with a heretic section. If you have a connection with a heretic sect, the most people you will attract are people from the Security Bureau, but if this matter is exposed, I am afraid that you will have to face the ship. Kaylan quickly glanced at Emoju and changed his words, I'm afraid I'm going to confront the group of people above. That's right, although I still don't know what is in the Grey Mist Forest, but since you act so serious, it must be a big trouble. 33 nodded with deep understanding. He has not known Kaylan for a long time. He only learned about the existence of the Immortal Crew Association recently. It took him 2 nights just to digest this information. Until now, 33 is still thinking about the problem. They often maintain their previous mindset and exclude such an abrupt existence as the Undead Crew Club. Those accounts have the highest security level. Just to maintain these accounts, you need to pay a large amount of maintenance fees to the bank every year. It is difficult for even the Security Bureau to trace the flow of funds. Emoju added from the side. Haha, the account security level is actually a cover created by those financial institutions, specially used to cut off stupid people with too much money. What you spend money to buy is just a psychological comfort. Don't talk about these passing money flowing through commercial banks with clear and verifiable accounts. Even those things in the black market that are directly traded with fixed amount circulation cards or by barter, can be found out by the Security Bureau. Many times, these guys just turn a blind eye. Kaylan waved his hand and said. Kaylan didn't know whether the Security Bureau could find these things, but the Immortal Crew would definitely be able to. If he gets these accounts, Kaylan can also find the families of these 4 people, but only if he can do it on the Ark, so this clue has no value at present. What is my father investigating? What is in the center of the Grey Mist Forest? Is it a ruin or something else? Emoju glanced at Kaylan, and then looked at 33, Asano Akira, Ivan and Zeelugo. He glanced at several people and said, I've already followed you here. If you want me to continue taking you deeper, you must at least tell me what you are looking for, right? There is a ruins in the center of the Grey Mist Forest. Kaylan nodded, but whether this ruins really exists, even I am not sure, because no one has ever seen that ruins with their own eyes. And your father, when I was serving in the Air Force Fleet, I once accepted a mission, and the goal of the mission was to use warships to destroy the ruins. Destroy the ruins? Why? Emoju was stunned. If there are ruins, shouldn't we send out exploration teams and ruin hunters? Why send out warships? Unfortunately, this is exactly what I want to know. Kaylan said. Then my father's mission failed. After crossing the Red Line, a fleet of 5 battleships, including a heavy cruiser, was frantically attacked by a large number of flying indigenous creatures flying out of the Grey Fog Forest. 2 battleships crashed in the Grey Fog Forest. Among them, the remaining 3 warships were severely damaged and had to abandon their mission and withdraw from this airspace. And your father was serving on these 3 warships at that time. Why, I never heard of this when I was serving in the Air Force Fleet, Emoju said in astonishment. Because this mission is the highest level of confidentiality, Kaylan replied. Those who participated in the mission will be sent to the front line with the highest mortality rate afterwards, and your father was injured and his identity file was confused, escaped by luck. Emoju's mouth opened slightly in surprise, and she stuttered, so, is this the reason why my father is so persistent in exploring the Grey Mist Forest? I think so. Kaylan nodded, but the intelligence I collected is very limited. I have no idea what your father saw or knew during that operation. If it was just a failed mission, he should not be allowed to choose to continue to take risks after recovering from his injury. The word risking yourself in K. Ian's words actually has a pun meaning. The first level refers to the danger of the grey mist forest itself, and the second level refers to the fact that private exploration of the grey mist forest will be punished if the undead crew members will learn about it, which will inevitably lead to death. My father never told me. I have one more thing that I'm a little confused about. I want you to explain it. Kaylan patted Emoju on the shoulder, who was in a daze. According to your description, after your father disappeared, the seniors in the team should there are only two people left, John and Anthony. Why did they choose to make you the leader of the team instead of taking the position yourself? These two people should be above you in terms of qualifications, experience, and ability, not to mention, they and you father also has a shared secret. If I were one of them, after you made the decision to no longer explore the depths of the grey fog forest and only harvest fog perches 200 meters away from the red line, I will definitely stand up against it. Kaylan paused and then said, after all, the purpose of forming this team was not to harvest the fog perch in the first place. Because they gave up later, after a few years, the depth of exploration only reached 500 meters, and there were only two of them left among the five. Uncle John and Uncle Anthony had a problem with me about this matter. After a short conversation, they said they were tired and no longer wanted to pursue the secret, Emoju said. They decided to let this secret rot in their stomachs and live peacefully, right? 33 interjected. To be honest, although I don't like this decision, from their point of view, this choice is wise. Have you said that other people haven't noticed anything unusual for all these years? When talking about other people, Kaylan subconsciously turned around and looked towards Dan Ning. But he suddenly discovered that Tanning was missing. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Chen San. Chapter 781. Where's Tanning? Where are the others? Kaylan felt a numbness in his spine, and he jumped up from the ground in an instant, looked around, and asked loudly. Damn it! I remember he was walking around just now. 33 rubbed his neck in disbelief. Why did he suddenly disappear from the world? Zeelugo. Did you sense when the Tanning disappeared? Kaylan placed her hope on the humanoid self-propelled plug-in in the team. No, Zeelugo shook his head gently. If you hadn't said that the man named Danning was missing, I wouldn't have remembered that there was such a person in the team. Yvonne nodded solemnly. I feel the same way. Just when you were communicating with Emoju, I seemed to have completely forgotten about Danning. This is not normal. The reason why they forgot the existence of Danning was not because Danning's presence among everyone was very low, but because there was some strange power in the grey mist forest that prompted them to ignore the missing person. Even Kaylan himself completely forgot about Danning's existence when talking to Emoju. If he still remembered Danning at that time, he would definitely ask Danning the same question. Maybe, there are things that Emoju didn't notice, but Danning, the old man in the team, did. However, when Kaylan now realized that Danning was mysteriously missing, that extremely unreal sense of forgetfulness was quickly fading away. It was as if he had had a dream. When he woke up, his memory of the real world everything started to become clear, but some details in the dream could not be recalled. The hairs on Ian's arms stood up. He controlled the rhythm of his breathing as much as possible. At the same time, he grabbed Emoju, who looked frightened and stood up suddenly. Don't move around. If you disappear too, it will be a big trouble. Asano Akira, did you hear the sound of Danning moving? I seemed to hear it at first, but then I didn't seem to remember that there was such a person in the team. From then on, I didn't hear his footsteps, Asano Akira said. As for I have no memory of when the change occurred. Yvonne strode to the front end of the safety rope. The auxiliary rope belonging to Danning was still fixed on the main rope. There were no signs of damage to either the rope itself or the lock. According to this logic, there was only one possibility. Danning took off the safety rope and walked into the thick fog while no one was paying attention. Could it be that something had affected Danning's sanity? This kind of thing is common in ruins, but the problem is that the action of putting on and taking off the safety rope is not convenient. The whole process takes at least a minute or so. Even if they are already very skilled at it, it will take at least 30 seconds. No, maybe no one noticed Danning's dangerous behavior. If the safety rope swayed strangely, apart from anything else, at least Asano Akira and Ze Lugo would definitely notice it. But everyone present forgot the existence of tanning in the past 10 minutes. That's it? That's it. Moju clutched the safety rope around his waist with both hands and shouted with rapid breathing, "Those people who disappeared in the grey fog forest. They all disappeared like this. No exception. This is too mysterious." 33 and Yvonne each took a step back, and their backs just hit each other. The latter subconsciously grabbed 33 with his non-mechanical prosthetic hand. The wrist, although this action may seem a bit gay, at least the sense of security it brings is real. You are right, in this forest, the safety rope is useless. Kaylan held Moju with one hand and put one hand on Ze Lugo's shoulder, saying to everyone, "Everyone, stay safe." Physical contact with each other, counting the number of people on each side every 30 seconds, by the way, there is also Valentina, you set the mecha to automatically follow, and then come over and hold Ze Lugo's hand. "New." Valentina responded. The hatch of the blasphemer mecha opened, and a girl wearing a tight-fitting driving suit jumped out of the cockpit that looked like a monster's stomach and walked over quickly. Fortunately, Moju was in a state of high tension and did not notice the internal structure of the blasphemer mecha. Otherwise, Kaylan would have to spend a lot of brain cells to find an excuse. Valentina walked to Kaylan, but she did not listen to Ian's instructions to hold Ze Lugo's hand. Instead, she grabbed the wrist of Ian's hand on Ze Lugo's shoulder. He leaned into Ian's chest in a sideways position. Her other mechanical prosthetic leg passed under Ian's ribs and was directly buckled on the main rope of the safety rope. From other angles, the two seemed to be embracing each other. Kaylan could feel that Valentina's breathing was a little rapid and her heart was beating fast. Chi Hanfan once told Kaylan about this matter. When she is in a dangerous situation, if Valentina is allowed to stay in the cockpit, then all her behaviors will be normal, and she can even behave under pressure. Inspire more delicate and extreme operations. But if she is allowed to come out of the cockpit at this time, her sense of security will be greatly weakened, and her whole person will become extremely uneasy. The most obvious characteristic is that she will habitually find a wall or other cover. Lean your body against it? Obviously, Valentina regarded herself as the wall at this time. Generally speaking, many people like her who almost died in the cockpit of a mecha will suffer from mental sequelae similar to claustrophobia. There are even some ace pilots who lost their lives after escaping death. When they sit in the cockpit, unspeakable fear will surge up crazily, with rapid breathing, rapid heartbeat, and a suffocation feeling like drowning. After the cockpit is completely closed, this symptom will become more obvious. What happened to Valentina was exactly the opposite of claustrophobia. She once told me that only when you hold the joystick of the mecha in your hand can you feel the existence of power. These were Chi Hanfan's original words. But Kaylan couldn't let her stay in the cockpit all the time. This forest was really weird. He had to put everyone in the team under his side to feel at ease. If Valentine was allowed to, if NA continued to drive the blasphemer mecha, she was afraid that the mecha would suddenly stop while walking, and then open the cockpit and see that it was empty. Judging from the strangeness of the sudden disappearance of tannins, this is very likely to happen. It seems it's time for Valentina to play the Titanfall series. Kaylan muttered in his heart, the pilot in this game can even exert stronger combat effectiveness without Titan. Mechas can be a help to people, but they can never be a shackles to people. Just when Kaylan was thinking this, a somewhat nonsensical sentence suddenly came out of Ze Lugo's mouth, "Do you like Kaylan?" Kaylan could feel Valentina's body stiffening in her arms, but she did not answer Ze Lugo's question. Is this considered acquiescence? Ian's heart skipped a beat, although he could indeed feel that Valentina had some strange feelings for him, especially after he enlightened her after the mecha competition. This feeling had already existed, but Lan Lan always felt that it should be gratitude or some other emotion, not love. If Major Chi Hanfan knew this, wouldn't he be able to blow his own head off with a wrench? For Chi Hanfan, Valentina is like his daughter. The cabbage raised by one hand was taken over by the pig. The pig was a famous pig with an owner guy. Lan could even imagine Chi Hanfan's face was so gloomy that it could drip water. But what made him feel most unjust was that he, the pig, had no idea of trying to win over this cabbage. It was entirely the cabbage's idea. No, now is not the time to think about this kind of thing. Anyway, we haven't told each other yet. Everything can be discussed, and it will be too late to deal with this matter after this operation is over and we return to the Ark. As for Ze Luo, just think of this guy as a childish person. No, this is wrong. Moju suddenly struggled. Lan, let me go. Don't let me go. Lan refused. If you get up and run straight into the fog, then I won't be able to pull you back. The disappearance of tannins is abnormal. Although this is already a restricted area behind the red line, it is only a few dozen meters away from the red line. For us, although this area is not 100% safe, we have never compromised here. It's better than others, Moju said quickly. Is Danning considered a veteran in your team? Yvonne asked. Yes, Moju nodded affirmatively. His qualifications are second only to my father and those elders who know the secret. He has explored the grey mist forest more times than me. The time my father disappeared, he was 500 meters away. He also participated in the in-depth exploration operations. You mean, with his ability, he won't capsize in this kind of gutter, right? Yvonne asked again. I wouldn't be surprised if it was any of you missing, but Denning, with his experience and ability, can even walk out of the penalty area from this position alone. How could he be missing here? Perhaps he has gone outside the red line now, 33 said. You mean, he was worried that we would silence him, so he found an opportunity to escape. Yvonne looked at 33, this possibility does exist. No. There's no way Dan Ning could leave me and escape alone, Moju said in a shocked voice. In the battle with those heretical sect believers just now, he was almost shot several times to protect himself. He is not that kind of person. You two, like each other. Lan glanced at her. Although Moju and Dan Ning looked to be about 10 years apart in age, they were a married couple who were 30 or 50 years apart. It's very common, and the gap of more than 10 years is actually not that big. Moju said nothing, but his cheeks turned red and white. Well, if you don't speak, that's the default. No wonder he took the initiative to ask to stay and follow us into the grey mist forest. He wanted to be by your side, but you, as the leader of the lumberjack team, became so panicked after Denning disappeared. All of this, it all makes sense, Lan analyzed. He saved me once before. Once, at a depth of about 100 meters, I got separated from the large group. At that time, I thought I was dead, because according to the rules of our team, if someone disappears in the fog, then it is assumed that the member has been broken and no manpower will be sent to search for the missing person, because that will only lead to greater losses. The only thing we can do is to try our best to compensate his family, Moju continued, but just when I was so desperate that I wanted to commit suicide, I saw a figure walking through the thick fog and appearing in my field of vision. I thought it was someone at first. My father, but when he walked up to me, I realized it was Tanning. So you secretly made a promise at that time. Tisk, the hero saves the beauty. Although the plot is a bit old, this kind of plot is indeed easy to capture the hearts of girls, Lan commented. By the way, that denim, did he break away from the main army and come to you alone? Yes, Moju nodded slowly. The large army stayed in place for 3 hours. This was the time they promised to Dan Ning, and it was within these 3 hours that Dan Ning found me and took me away. Go back. So, This Danning is indeed very familiar with the grey fog forest. He can walk alone through the grey fog at a depth of about 100 meters, and can also find missing people. People with such abilities are indeed you shouldn't have disappeared in this place. As he spoke, Kaylan suddenly changed the subject, stared at Emoju and asked, "You said you were separated from the main force once, can you describe in detail what happened when you fell behind?" I don't know how to describe it. There was a trace of embarrassment on Emoju's face. Just 1 second I was following the others, and the next second, my consciousness seemed to be in a trance. I was left standing alone, surrounded by thick fog. I couldn't see or hear anything. "Did you wear a safety rope at that time?" Kaylan asked again. "It was tied, but when I was alone, the auxiliary rope around my waist disappeared. Later I found out that the auxiliary rope remained on the main rope, and there was no sign of damage, just like now," Emoju said. "This way of fixing the safety rope is impossible to loosen. If someone or something unlocks your safety rope, you will definitely find out at the first time. From a practical point of view, this kind of thing it's impossible," Kaylan thought, "but if your memory, or other people's memories are tampered with, then any unreasonable event can be found to have a reasonable explanation. Especially the moment of trance you just mentioned is very suspicious. Coupled with our ignoring of Tannen just now, there seems to be something affecting our brains in this forest." In addition to these, Kaylan also thought of the discrepancy in memory between himself and others when he was in the glacier ruins. However, he did not say this directly. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Chen-Mi-san. Chapter 782. Affects the brain? But the problem is that we didn't inhale the mist at all, 33 said with a frown. It may not be the cause of the fog, it may be the magnetic field, or it may be some extraordinary power that cannot be detected by human technology. The gap between us and Alpha civilization is simply a chasm, Ivan said. Tisk, that's right. 33 glanced down at the black blade close to his fingers and nodded. And I discovered one more thing. Ivan raised the transparent specimen bag in his hand, which contained several pieces of tree bark that he had spent a lot of effort peeling off with his robotic arm, but now, the bark separated from the trunk has shown obvious signs of decay, turning into something like rotten cotton wool. This plant should not have evolved naturally, but is a creation of Alpha civilization's biotechnology. Like the erosion seed, part of the limb will decompose and become necrotic in a short time after leaving the main body. From a certain perspective, it seems that it's also quite environmentally friendly, Ivan continued. No, if the bark of the tree will rot when it is peeled off, then how did these loggers transport the harvested wood back to the ark? Do they have any special way of preserving it? 33 wondered. Kaylan also looked at Emoju with some curiosity. Actually, there is no special preservation method. It's just that the parts we choose to harvest are different. Do you know that there is a plant called banyan tree on the earth? Emoju changed the topic and suddenly asked about another plant that seemed to be trees that have nothing to do with the problem. I know, Kaylan and Ivan said in unison, but 33 was stunned for a moment, with a confused look on his face. Ugh, after being a boss for most of my life, I still suffered the disadvantage of being uneducated. 33 laughed at himself. How come the indigenous plants on Alpha Planet are related to the banyan trees on Earth? Please tell me in detail. Banyan tree, a banyan tree plant of the Moraceae family, a large tree, up to 15-25 meters in height. Ivan read like an encyclopedia of humanoid creatures, but when he read, the banyan tree crown has a huge area, extending outward. There will be clusters of beard-like aerial roots hanging down. Once these aerial roots touch the ground, they will take root. But he suddenly stopped. These aerial roots drilled into the soil are the same as the roots on the main trunk of the banyan tree itself. They can absorb nutrients from the soil and continue to grow. The thickest ones can even grow close to the main trunk. At this stage, these aerial roots becoming a pillar root. A large banyan tree that is old enough can have thousands or even tens of thousands of pillar roots. Describing the strange scene of a single tree becomes a forest, Kaylan continued. I didn't expect you ruin hunters to know a lot about botany. Moju glanced at Kaylan and Yvonne in surprise. Yes, the mist perch is very similar to the banyan tree on Earth, that is, a single tree forms a forest. Behind the red line, an ordinary adult mist tree covers an area of more than 10,000 square meters. Most of the tree trunks you see are actually hanging down from the crown. The pillar roots coming down. What do you mean? All these mist trees are actually the same one. 33 raised his head and looked around. How amazing. Well, the largest single fog tree we have ever seen covers an area of dozens of hectares. According to my father's speculation, the core area of the Grey Fog Forest, the place you are going to, the foggy mountain that reaches the sky underneath, there is probably only one mist perch. The core area covers at least 100 square kilometers, which is 10,000 hectares. Is such a large mist habitat enough to be called the king of trees? Yvonne asked excitedly. My father said that this super mist perch is probably inseparable from the secret hidden in the center of the forest. Mojweo said, this is one of the few times he has mentioned to me and that secret stuff. This forest should have been planted by the alphas. What is their purpose for doing this? Is it because they are hiding something? Kaylan couldn't help but fell into thinking. He suddenly felt that information about the undead crew would be revealed. Deviation. Is there a possibility that what is hidden in the core of the Grey Mist Forest is not an engine wreckage, but something else? The trunk you just selected is actually just a pillar root. Even if the pillar root is harvested, it will rot into slag in just a few hours. Only the real trunk can be preserved. Find the location of the trunk. In fact, it is the longest step in our harvesting work. Moju looked at the specimen bag in Ivan's hand and said, another point is that the main trunk will not eat people, only the pillar roots will be eaten by the fog. Wood is used as a feeding organ. So when I saw the corpse embedded in the root of the trunk, I knew it was a pillar root. Then how can we determine which one is the real trunk? Do we need to dig the bark of the tree one by one to check? 33 asked. The bark of the main trunk will also rot when it is cut off. The marrow located in the heart of the fog tree must be connected together to prevent it from rotting. It is precisely for this reason that it is difficult to process the fog tree into floors and walls. Surfaces or small decorations. The misty wood furniture on the ark are all large pieces containing the marrow. Moju explained. Then how can we find the main trunk? Use this. Moju found a strange piece of equipment from his backpack. The handle of this equipment seemed to be modified from a civilian model hook gun, but the muzzle was replaced with a sling gun. Slender hollow steel drill. This thing can pierce the trunk of the foggy tree and reach the heart of the tree. If the marrow can be extracted from the heart of the tree, it will be the real trunk. If not, it will be the pillar root. Moju said. A stupid method, but reliable, practical and highly maneuverable, Kaylan commented. He was not very interested in this knowledge. Anyway, the purpose of his trip was not to harvest these mist trees. The method has nothing to do with him. Apart from its fire resistance, fog perch itself is not a very high-end material. Its physical properties can be completely surpassed by many new materials that can be synthesized at the level of human civilization and technology. In addition to relying on scarcity, it has become a material used by the rich. Apart from being a show-off toy, this kind of wood is worthless in Ian's eyes. Of course, this is limited to mist trees that have been harvested and processed into wood, and living mist trees are not included. What is the purpose of the alpha people planting these fog perches here? P.S. Thanks to book friend 20220104211832727 for the 100 starting coins. Alien Relic Hunter author, and Chen-Mi-san. Chapter 783. Whether it is the characteristics of the mist habitat itself or its distribution on Alpha Planet, It gives people the feeling that this forest was created by the Alpha civilization. Except for the gray mist forest, it can be found in any corner of Alpha planet. There is no trace of the mist perch and its exclusive parasite species mist vine. The Institute has also tried to transplant fog perches to other places, but even in the ecological experimental cabin where various climatic and environmental conditions perfectly simulated the gray fog forest, this strange plant has never been planted. The gray mist forest is not a dead land. The encounter of the Special Operations Fleet tells mankind that there are actually a large number of indigenous creatures living in this forest. If the mist perch can survive elsewhere, then so many indigenous creatures will be so. Their seeds must have been carried out of the forest over the years, but they are not. Both the mist habitat and the animals bound to this strange ecological environment seem to be locked to this land. This is a forbidden zone artificially created by the Alpha civilization, and they created this forbidden zone. The purpose is to prevent outsiders from prying into the secret hidden in the center of the restricted area. If you think about it from this direction, Kaylan feels that the core area of the gray mist forest will most likely not be the site of an engine wreckage. He can conduct reverse reasoning from two angles to verify this point of view. First of all, from the perspective of Alpha civilization, the Alpha survivor in the ruins of engine number 92 clearly expressed its desire to communicate with humans, and obtained information from the memory fragments of Ian's subconscious. Most Alpha people have this idea. Since they want to communicate with humans, they should not set up their hiding place in a place where humans cannot enter. In addition, from the perspective of Emoju's father, Emos Woryui, although Kaylan is still not sure what clues Emos Woryui found in that failed operation, if there is an engine wreckage in the Grey Fog Forest, there are people living in it. A remnant of the Alpha civilization, Kaylan felt that Emos Woryui would most likely not be so fanatical about going to the core of the Grey Mist Forest. First of all, as the C.I.C information control officer of a high-mobility support ship, Emos Woryui is not at a low level, but he is definitely not high enough to have access to the core secrets of the Ark. Therefore, it is impossible for him to know about the existence of the symbiote. Yes. As an ordinary human being, even if he could pass through the Grey Fog Forest and reach that place, what could he do? He can neither communicate with the Alpha, nor can he judge whether the other person is kind or malicious toward humans. Moreover, judging from the equipment of the lumberjack team, if the Alpha wants to kill them, they have no chance of resistance. Then why does he want to go to the core of the Grey Mist Forest so much? You can't just rush to die, right? This doesn't make sense. The Grey Mist Forest is like a fortress. These plants and weapons are the walls of the fortress, and the flying indigenous creatures capable of shooting down battleships are the anti-aircraft firepower of this fortress. But whether the purpose of this fortress is to prevent people from outside from entering, or to prevent things inside from coming out, it's hard to say. Kaylan couldn't help but think of the conversation he had with Hound and the others before departure. Could it be that the Grey Mist Forest was really a trap set by the undead crew against him? They thought they had broken free from their control, but in fact, entering the Grey Mist Forest was the result they really wanted to see? If this is really the case, then their purpose should not be to kill themselves. There are many ways to kill themselves, and deceiving themselves into a dangerous place to kill someone with a borrowed knife is undoubtedly the most unreliable one. Kaylan is a symbiote. In a place with the ruins of Alpha civilization, symbiotes have a home field advantage that is unimaginable to ordinary people. If you want to use the trap left by Alpha civilization to kill a symbiote, it is better to directly sending a team of clones to carry out the assassination has a higher success rate. Perhaps their purpose is similar to that of the prophets? When he was in the molten mine area, the prophet wanted to use himself to activate Yagonactor, so this time, would it be the undead crew who wanted to use himself to activate some mechanism hidden in the Grey Mist Forest? But are they so confident that they can pass through this forest? After walking less than 100 meters, one of the two senior lumberjacks was already missing. Even Kaylan began to have some doubts. Can his team really reach the core of the gray mist forest? Everyone continued to move forward in one direction. Every 5 meters, Ivan would take out 2 beacons made of special alloy from his bag, nail one into the nearby tree trunk, and the other into the soil. In the cargo hold carried on the back of the blasphemer mecha, there were more than 100,000 beacons the size of this kind of bullet case. Before walking very far, 33, who was walking at the front, made a stop gesture. He bent down and picked up a gas mask used by loggers from the ground. This gas mask is complete. The fixing straps and buckles are not damaged. The oxygen generator tank is also well connected to the valve under the mask through a pipe. Judging from the pressure gauge, there is a residual amount of oxygen generator. At least more than 80% is left. Is this Danning's gas mask? Kaylan guessed. If it were the mask left here before, it wouldn't look so clean, and the oxygen generator in the jar must have finished reacting long ago. Yes, this is his mask, Moju said immediately. Look at the TN written in marker next to the valve of the mask. That's his initials. He actually took off the mask. There was despair in Moju's voice. If she had held on to the illusion that Tanning could walk out of the forest on her own before, now this illusion can be said to be completely shattered. Tanning is not an enhanced person, nor has she received body modifications in terms of toxin resistance. After losing her after the team's isolation barrier and gas mask, even if he could regain consciousness immediately and find the right direction, he would never be able to get out of the forest before the toxins in the mist took effect. The gas mask that fell to the ground was tantamount to a direct death sentence for Dan Ning. Moju covered her mouth, her eyes slightly red. Keep going, maybe, he's not far from us. What if we can find him? 33 couldn't help but comforted, but when he turned around, I saw a vague humanoid skeleton floating towards the side in the thick fog. 33 suddenly tensed up, and dozens of black flying blades instantly rose up and hovered in front of him.